Good morning, everyone. Paul Ruppel here with Fox 29 News Now. Happy Friday. Been a long week. A lot of rain last night as a result of the remnants of Hurricane Michael. Now an extratropical storm off the coast. Let's get you a live look at that. See, it is way up in Rhode Island and Massachusetts at this point, moving out of Connecticut and New York. Storm brought some copious amounts of rain to parts of our area overnight. Some areas seeing in excess of several inches of rain. We're going to get you a report on that soon. We also have a bit of the FEMA news conference that was just held to update about their response to Hurricane Michael. We'll have all that for you. Also, let's take a quick look at the stock market. You see, after 2 days of large losses, I believe in the area of 1,200, 1,300 points. It was 830 the first day and over 500 the second day. Stock market's opening up at 345 up, the New York Stock Exchange. Dow Jones Industrial is over 25,000 at 25,392 at the moment. So good news to report there. We are going to take you live to an event very shortly. This will be Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro standing with survivors of clergy sex abuse. He's going to encourage the Senate to pass a statute of limitations reform. Standing with him will be nearby District Attorney Steele and Weintraub. That's Kevin Steele of Montgomery County and Matthew Weintraub of Bucks County, the district attorneys for those two counties. And as I mentioned, they're going to encourage the Pennsylvania State Senate to pass a statute of limitations reform. This, of course, has to do with the Pennsylvania clergy abuse scandal. Much of it recently released. Let's get you a live look at the press conference as we're talking about it. The report that was recently unveiled that dealt with archdioceses outside of Philadelphia and abuse there. Of course, a couple years back, there was a report that covered abuse within the Philadelphia Archdiocese. What's before the legislature is a bill that would eliminate the criminal statute of limitations for sexually abusing children. That's one of the 4 reforms recommended unanimously by the 23 men and women of the 40th statewide investigative grand jury. They were the folks who issued the groundbreaking 884-page report in August that dealt with dioceses outside of Philadelphia and abuse cases. We're going to take you live to that event as soon as it happens. In the meantime, let's take a quick look at our weather. It's a beautiful day outside right now. Nice crisp fall morning. You can see blue skies, some white clouds there. Nice shot of Old City outside our Fox 29 studios. Get you the current temps here. We're at 60 in Philadelphia. We've moved out of the 50s. We're now up to 60. A little bit warmer at the shore points, 63 in Atlantic City, 61 at Wildwood. A little cooler to our north and west, 57s, 56s in some of the north and west suburbs. You can see those cool temperatures are all along the eastern seaboard at the moment, 50s and 60s for the most part. We've got 40s back in Toronto, upstate New York, western Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Still warm in Florida, 81, 83 down in Tampa and Miami. I think that's Miami. 68 on the Gulf Coast, New Orleans there, 71 in Houston. So some cooler temperatures across the country right now. And you see 27 up in Rapid City, 32 in Minneapolis. Even cool in some of the western locales, Las Vegas 64, 68 in Phoenix. Visibility pretty good across the area. As we said, those nice clear skies, 10-mile visibility across the area. Do have some gusty winds right now. The sustained winds are 25 in Philadelphia at the moment. 25 miles per hour, same as Mount Pocono. a bunch of 20s and teens across the area. We've had some pretty strong gusts with that wind blowing out of the northeast. 33 mile per hour gust within the last hour in Philadelphia. 37 in Wilmington. So that's what's helped ushering the remnants of Hurricane Michael out of our area. Satellite, you see, there's the remains of Michael off to in the upper right corner, off to the north and east. And it's going to zip across the Atlantic. I believe I saw some projections showing that the low, the extratropical storm at this point, is going to make it as far as it could make it as far as Dublin or Ireland and the UK. And there's something that's going to please everybody. The dew points have dropped. Much less humid at this point. We're seeing dew point in the 40s. We were over 70 for a good period of time there. Let's see if we have a wind chill yet. It doesn't look like it. Wind temperatures look about pretty similar to our current temperatures. Here's the low off the coast and moving on out. I don't think this is going to show us a wide enough view to see where it's going from here, but well away from us. And here's a look at your 7-day forecast from the Fox 29 Weather Authority. Today it's going to be sunny and windy, 62, good for a 7 in our weather by the numbers. Ditto for tomorrow, despite AM showers and it being a bit cooler at 58, 48 overnight. Of course, always feels better than a 7 after you win a NFC East division game like the Eagles did last night with their win over the New York Giants. Sunday, partly sunny, cool, 60 degrees. Overnight low of 43. That's an 8 on our weather by the numbers. Shower chance Monday, 68. Another shower chance on Tuesday at 58. 10-degree drop in temperature there. Sweater weather, we're calling Wednesday 59, and ditto for Thursday when the high will be 55. So overnight lows in the 40s. Several nights in this 7-day forecast. Looks like district attorneys and the Pennsylvania State Attorney General are approaching the microphone. But they were. Then not seeing our signal. Looks like it locked up for a moment. So let's take you to a look at the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. See what I can find out about that news conference signal. All right, let's get you a look at the live conditions while we're looking at the parkway here, and we check on that feed. As we mentioned, 60 degrees, current conditions, dew point of 39. Nice and comfortable. Winds out of the northwest at 25 miles per hour. Let's take another look at the stock market here. It was just up about 300 points. It's now 294. That's a nice change, welcome change from the last 2 days. A lot of volatility in the market at the moment. We're checking on that news conference from Norristown. I'm going to take you out there as soon as possible. Again, this will be Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, and there he is. Let's let you listen in. Oh, and it just went away again. We'll get that for you as soon as possible.
Of the Montgomery County Police Chiefs Association. I'm honored every day to work with victim advocate Jennifer Storm, and I'm especially grateful to be here with Patty Fortney, who will be joined by her sister Carolyn in a few moments. They are survivors of sexual abuse at the hands of a priest in central Pennsylvania. We are all here today to talk about eliminating the criminal statute of limitations, the first recommendation called for by the grand jurors. You know, I'm often asked why, in this report that named 301 predator priests with corroborating evidence of their abuse from the church's own secret archives, why did we only charge 2 of those 301? The simple answer is that our state laws do not go far enough to protect victims and ensure that abusers are held accountable. We ran a statute of limitations test on each and every one of those living predator priests. And because of our state laws, we could only charge 2 of them. I would also note that we ran a statute of limitations test on each and every one of the church leaders who enabled the abuse or covered up the abuse. And sadly, none of them could be charged for their role. Law enforcement, I believe, should be able to charge each and every single one of the living predator priests who abused children like the Fortney sisters. That is why the grand jury recommended eliminating the criminal statute of limitations on child sexual abuse to ensure that no matter how much time has passed, a predator can be held accountable for crimes against children. 39 states, the District of Columbia, and Guam have no criminal statute of limitations on child sex abuse. It is time for Pennsylvania to join that list, to listen to the grand jurors, to follow the lead of what the victims are calling for, and to do the right thing. It is fair, it is right, and it is just. Everyone knows that sexual abuse is traumatic. Predators in a position of power choose victims that they know are vulnerable, like children. Or they choose people who simply won't be believed if they ever come forward. This county knows a little something about that power imbalance and did the right thing to hold people accountable when they prey on those victims. We can no longer allow anyone, especially a priest, to exploit that power imbalance and keep people out of the hands of the law. Following the abuse, victims struggle with everything from physical issues like stuttering to mental health issues like PTSD. And some sadly don't survive the traumatic tale of their abuse. We know that it often takes survivors years, months, even decades to overcome the trauma of their abuse and share their truth with anyone, whether it's their family or a doctor or law enforcement. The data is quite clear in this area. Only 1/3 of abuse victims report what happened to them while they're still children. 1/3. The average age for a victim to come forward to share their truth is 52 years old. Yet the current status of our laws in Pennsylvania say that only criminal charges can be filed for a survivor before they turn 50 years old. During our investigation, I had the honor of spending time with survivors all across Pennsylvania. One of the survivors I spent some time with in his backyard was Bob. I went to his backyard in Bethlehem. He is 83 years old. Bob waited until his late 70s to come forward and share his truth about the abuse he suffered at the hands of a priest when he was just 12 or 13 years old. He came out and shared his truth in his late 70s after seeing the movie Spotlight in the Lehigh Valley. Bob lived a full life with his wife of nearly 50 years. She never knew his truth. Bob talked to me about how he couldn't hug his son or have physical contact with his son because of the trauma that he suffered when he was abused by this priest. Bob deserved to be in a position where his predator could be held accountable. Bob came forth and shared his truth when he felt comfortable doing that. We shouldn't be time-barred in law enforcement from being able to hold that predator or any predator accountable, and we should encourage survivors to have the strength to share their truth when they feel comfortable doing that. Our Commonwealth has made some progress in the past 35 years to reform the statute of limitations, but we still lag far behind, as I said before. The chart to my left describes generally what our statute of limitations have been over time. Between 1984 and 1991, we had 5 years to bring a case of things like rape and incest, and 2 years for everything else. Then after amendments in 1991, between 91 and 2002, we changed the law to keep that time period but have it start after the survivor turned 18. Between 2002 and 2006, it was amended to say that we would have a 12-year statute of limitations after the survivor turned 18. From 2006 until present time, it's until the age of 50. The grand jury made it clear in its first recommendation that we need to eliminate the statute of limitations period and join those 39 other states. Now listen, the burden is on us, the prosecutors, to make the case. But we should not be barred from trying. We should not be barred from trying. The church, you have to understand, used a sophisticated, coordinated, systematic approach to covering up this abuse, with a stated purpose oftentimes of shielding these predators from the arm of law enforcement, of moving them to some other place for a long enough period of time that law enforcement wouldn't know about it and wouldn't be able to bring a case. They were doing this methodically and purposefully. They took advantage of those laws in order to protect these predators. I want to be clear. We unearthed an organized criminal enterprise here in Pennsylvania. For now, they got away with some of it. But what does it say to Pennsylvanians and survivors if after seeing what we've seen in this grand jury report, learning what we've learned, seeing the global effects of it, that senators in Pennsylvania fail to act and continue to allow a system of laws like this that can be exploited in the organized criminal manner that it was? What does that say about us if we fail to act right now? Every day, men and women in law enforcement see victims of every age come forward to share what happened to them as children. Here in Montgomery County, in Bucks County, in Plymouth Township, in the Office of Attorney General, we listen to victims. We listen to their truth, and we investigate. Survivors don't always remember every detail of their abuse, and they've suffered years of trauma as a result of it. Our job, of course, is to follow the facts and the evidence wherever it leads and apply the law. If the allegations prove themselves to be credible and the evidence is sufficient, we must be able to prosecute predators no matter how much time has passed. If not, these predators will be left in communities here in Pennsylvania and beyond to abuse again. I've stated many times that I unequivocally support each of the 4 recommendations as written by the grand jurors, as endorsed by Representative Rozzi, himself a victim of abuse, as passed by with an over 170 vote margin in the House of Representatives, and most importantly, as embraced by these victims. I stand with these survivors. I stand with the 23 men and women of the grand jury who recommended this. I stand with the House of Representatives who had the political courage to pass these reforms. I stand with Governor Wolf, who has said very clearly he wants a bill on his desk that reflects this grand jury report that he would sign. The question now is, where do senators stand? Will they actually pass these 4 reforms, or will they bow to pressure from the lobbyists, from the Catholic Church, and the insurance companies who are working overtime against it? I don't know how any responsible lawmaker who actually took the time to read this grand jury report could vote against these survivors, could vote against supporting these grand jury reforms, who could vote against giving Matt Weintraub and Kevin Steele, myself, and other prosecutors the tools to hold these predators accountable. That's the test that faces the state Senate when they return to session next week. They have 3 days to do their work before they go home and campaign, before they go home and ask voters in their district for their stamp of approval. I think every person in Pennsylvania who's taken the time to learn about this report has been rocked by what they've read, been stunned by what they read. They're demanding action in Harrisburg right now, and let's hope the senators actually stand up and do the right thing. I'm proud to have partners in law enforcement who have worked closely with us on this and many other cases. To have leaders like Kevin Steele here in Montgomery County who have consistently shown a willingness to listen to victims and do the right thing. And it's my honor to introduce Kevin Steele at this time.
Thanks, buddy. All right. So I believe a new day is dawning across our county here in Montgomery County, across the state of Pennsylvania, and across our country. And it's been a long time coming. We prosecuted a case here not too long ago that put a high wattage spotlight on the crimes of sexual assault and rape perpetrated against women by men that they knew. At that trial, we watched and we learned in a courtroom across the street as an expert schooled us on rape myths and victim behavior. Everyone in that courtroom learned that 1 in 5 women have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and 1 in 7 men have been. We learned that what most people believe about sexual assault and victim behavior is wrong. Wrong. People think that they know what a victim is supposed to do after they've been assaulted. But the collective body of knowledge that people think is in a category of what we know as rape myths. And one of the most misunderstood areas about sexual assault and rape is prompt reporting. So one common yet falsely held belief is that when a woman is raped, she goes straight to the phone and calls the police. That may be a case with a stranger rape, which accounts for less than 14% of all sexual assaults and rapes, but it's not true when women are raped or sexually assaulted by someone they know. We heard at the trial that almost universally, victims don't report sexual assault right away if it's perpetrated by somebody that they know and they trust, like a former intimate partner, a date, a family member, a coworker, or acquaintance, or somebody in power. When victims do report, and most don't ever report to law enforcement or any official entity, they do so long after the assault. Delayed reporting is the norm, not the exception. Delayed reporting is a reality in sexual assaults and rapes. Victims need to process what has happened to them, even more so if alcohol or a drug was used by the perpetrator that affects the victim's memory. They need to come to the grips with the fact that someone they trusted or thought they knew did this to them. And they need to sort out in their own mind what happened, because someone undergoing that type of trauma, the memory of the assault is not always linear and precise. So there are numerous reasons for delayed reporting, but it is the reality in sexual assault cases, and that means that Pennsylvania law regarding the statute of limitations on sexual assaults does not serve the interest of justice. If the evidence is there after an investigation by law enforcement, if the evidence shows that a crime happened, then members of our law enforcement community should be able to charge a perpetrator and seek justice. There's a growing awareness that far too many sex crimes have never been reported, that women have lived in fear of telling anyone about having been sexually assaulted or raped, that adult men and women have lived in fear of coming forward to tell what happened to them as children when they were sexually assaulted by a family member, family friend, or trusted adult. So now is time for a change. We need to hear the victims' accounts, investigate them appropriately, and support the victim appropriately, and then charge when appropriate. We need to follow the evidence wherever it leads and to whomever it leads, without regard to fame, without regard to fortune, or without regard to the length of time since the commission of the sexual assault and rape. So now's time to end the statute of limitations for sexual assaults in Pennsylvania. I have a partner from our bordering county of Bucks County that's here with me today, and I'm very blessed with the relationship and the partnership that we have, and the working relationship not of only the two of us, but our detectives and our law enforcement communities that partner on a daily basis in these things. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce my partner from the north, Bucks County, Matt Weintraub.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Josh. I'd like to thank General Shapiro, and Kevin Steele, and everybody else that's aligned up here. Very honored to be able to support this and to have this opportunity, this pulpit, frankly, to be able to say what I want to say about this. As some of you may know, I prosecuted child abuse cases for many, many years, and they are so difficult. You can't fathom the bravery that women like this and that young children, frankly, have to instill in themselves, because that first reporting is the most difficult thing that they've ever had to do, aside from being perpetrated upon in the first place. And it is unreasonable to place a time limitation on when a young person or a person in the prime of their life should absolutely have to come forward. That is not fair, that is not reasonable, and that protection for these perpetrators must stop now. I'm very proud of our state representatives because they have advanced this bill, and it's now up to our state senators to do the same. Frankly, there should be no statute of limitations on courage. In these cases, child sexual abuse cases, there should be no statute of limitations on justice. And if a victim of sexual abuse is brave enough to come forward, whenever that may be in his or her lifetime, and we in law enforcement have the ability to gather evidence to support their allegations, to prove that this insidious crime was perpetrated on these helpless victims, then justice demands that we be able to prosecute them so that justice can be served on behalf of these victims of child sexual abuse and sexual assault. There is no other way. The passage of time should not diminish our ability or prevent us from being able to carry out our oaths, and that is to protect everybody, especially our most vulnerable in our population. And to that end, I urge you in the Pennsylvania Senate to please pass this law so that we can continue to do the job with every tool and weapon in our disposal and arsenal that we need to keep people safe and to prevent future predation. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce the president of the Montgomery County Police Chiefs Association, Chief Lawrence of Plymouth Township, who is going to also address you at this time. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I'm honored to be here, and I want to thank the Attorney General for bringing the attention to this cause. I've been to a few press conferences. I believe this is probably, if not the most important, one of the most important ones that I've attended. There's nothing harder for a police officer to take information or a report from someone and then have to tell them we can't do anything because of the statute of limitation for a victim has passed. This needs to be addressed, and it needs to be passed by the Senate and by the state. Pennsylvania needs to get in line with the other 39 states to take care of this matter. Just for a police officer, as I stated, nothing's harder for us than to turn someone away. And when we have to call the district attorney and have their opinion and for them to tell us you can't do anything, believe me, that hurts us. I cannot imagine what it does to those victims. Please, to the Senate of Pennsylvania, pass this, address this issue. And with that, I would just like to introduce Ms. Jennifer Storm of the Victims Association. Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you. And as always, thank you, General Shapiro. I mentioned to him that I would fly anywhere and stand with him anywhere on this issue. And as the chief so eloquently expressed, this is, in my humble opinion, one of the single most important things that we could do in Pennsylvania right now to protect not only our future generations, but to give voice and to give closure to some extent, to give an access to justice for the thousands upon thousands of victims that we know are time barred right now. You know, I often talk about my son because when you talk about these issues, you can't help but think about your own family. And I have a 3-year-old son, and I teach him to respect law enforcement to the extent that now when he sees a man or a woman in uniform, he'll walk up and say, you know, thank you for your service. And he's all proud of himself. And he knows that those are the men and women that are tasked to protect and serve. He knows to call 911 if something happens in our home, if he gets lost, if he gets hurt. Imagine the message that goes out to a child or a parent or a survivor who finally bravely picks up that phone and discloses abuse to only be told there's nothing we can do. Think about the psychological and emotional message that sends to that person. When we talk about sexual violence, we know that these cases are enshrouded in shame, right? Shame is the driving emotion that every victim of sexual violence feels. What do you think that response does to that person? It just further encases them in that shame. It's one of the single hardest things that I have to do as a victim advocate, to tell a survivor, I'm so sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. Our statute of limitations, we have made progress, and the general eloquently detailed the progress that we have made, and that is because of grand jury reports, because of high-profile cases that have come forth, but we have not gone far enough. We must fully abolish the criminal statute of limitation. At this point, when survivors call, and they are calling constantly, because thank God we're in a place and a time where they feel comfortable calling, I need a calculator and a calendar, usually a law book, and probably one of the general staff to determine whether that person can seek justice in Pennsylvania. That's an atrocity. It's shameful. It's embarrassing that I have to sit down and calculate all of these facts that are meaningless to this person who just so desperately wants their perpetrator to be held accountable. They want to be believed. They want to be supported. The Senate has the ability to end that next week. Moving forward, prospectively, we appreciate we can't go back criminally. That's why the idea of a window is so vitally important. For those thousands of victims who cannot go back criminally, they need a path through the courts with the validation of attorneys, with the ability to depose people, with the ability to subpoena and collect evidence to prove their case in a court of law. They need that ability. They need that justice. And we owe it to them. The grand jury reports and the horrific atrocities that have been uncovered in them, and the frustrations by the good men and women who stand here who can't do anything about it, they deserve that. We've had survivors pounding the pavements of the Capitol. And it's funny, I still hear from senators that say, well, I'm not hearing from any of my constituents. Well, then they haven't checked their voicemail, or they haven't looked on their Twitter feed, or they haven't looked into their emails, because our survivors have come out in droves, making significant sacrifices, missing work, taking time off work, sacrificing their families, coming to the Capitol because they want not only justice for themselves, but they want to make a better future for our society. The fact that we have an institution, and I'm going to get to the fourth recommendation, the fact that we have an institution that has been able to be so powerful and so exploitive in not just the Commonwealth, but in the world, and then also had legal tools at their disposal that could say, not only am I going to lock you down in terms of keeping you quiet, but you can't go to that one person that we tell society that you can trust to serve you and to respond, which is law enforcement. All four of these recommendations are there for a reason. They're vital. They're important. There's been a lot of talk about a fund, and I want to address this really quickly and really concisely. The Catholic Church wants to create a fund. Of course they do. It's the ultimate tactic. They bribe people. They conceal, and they hide behind their money. If any senator even entertains the idea of a Catholic-funded fund for victims, then I think it's pretty clear who's in charge. And that will be the exact overt statement that they send to every citizen in this Commonwealth if they enact any legislation that has to do with a Catholic Church-funded fund. What it also does is it only speaks to the victims of the Catholic Church. And we know from the Solibay grand jury report, the Sandusky grand jury report, and all of the other cases that have come up that have shown the statute of limitations time barring victims from seeking access, we know that there are perpetrators hiding in direct light of all of us, that are hiding behind these statute of limitations. If we only produce a fund for the victims of the Catholic Church, what are we saying to all of those other victims? That your abuse doesn't matter? That your path to justice is not just as equally important, that your financial loss, that your need for compensation for counseling is not as important? We can't say that. We're better than that in Pennsylvania. I know we're better than that in Pennsylvania. These brave men and women are coming back time and time again to say that. The House of Representatives stood up and took a bold, brave move. I'm asking the Senate to do the same. Show the citizens of the Commonwealth who's in charge. Is it our elected officials, or is it the money behind the Catholic Church? In my time working with crime victims, and I've been working with crime victims for close to 20 years, I've never met a family more harmed by what we're here to talk about today, but also strengthened so amazingly in the resolve to change this. That when I call them at 10 o'clock at night and say, hey, we've got a press conference tomorrow, do you think you can be there? It's a no-brainer. Our survivors are making the personal financial sacrifices every day to change these laws. I'm daring the Senate to have a fraction of that bravery. And for that, I want to introduce Patty and Carolyn Fortney.
Before we start, I just have to thank General Josh Shapiro for his, not just his work, tireless work and dedication to the child victims in Pennsylvania, past and present and future, but just for his care and compassion. I believe that he has just touched us on a level that none of us even expected, just because of your dedication and your genuine concern for all of us. And I just want to thank you on behalf of our family. And I have to thank Jennifer Storm, too, the Pennsylvania Victims Advocate. She has been incredible for everyone and our family. Just, I mean, a lot of what you talked about is because you've empowered us and you've helped us get here, and we just thank you. Sorry, I just couldn't. This is our first press conference, so I'm one of a family of 11, consisting of 8 girls, 1 boy, and my mom and dad. We were raised in a very small town outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where we attended Catholic church, Catholic school, and we were involved in all of the sports and activities that the Catholic school provided. I loved being from a big family, and I loved being a Catholic. In 1982, our lives were drastically and forever changed when the Reverend Augustine M. Jella, our new parish priest, came into our lives. Over the course of a decade, this predator priest molested 5 girls in our beautiful family, including me. At this point, I want to make something very clear, that although 5 of us were physically touched by the abuse, all of us were forever affected. The effects of his calculated abuse, coupled with the orchestrated cover-up by the Harrisburg Diocese, created severe trauma that has resulted in trust issues, broken relationships, substance abuse, severe PTSD, suicide attempts, and the list goes on and on and on. As my family struggled to come to terms with what happened to us, if that's even possible, Bishop Keeler made his way to becoming cardinal. Monsignor Overball continued to cover up abuse in our diocese, and the Catholic Church in our diocese continued to flourish, as it always has, while some of its members were being devoured in the process. We learned early on, after disclosing our abuse to the diocese, that we were expendable. Today, I'm speaking to our Pennsylvania senators directly. I'm asking for justice, not just for me, but all of the victims across the state of Pennsylvania, and for the families of those that are no longer with us, who we have met many families who have lost their children because of this. You know, my family was sentenced is actually a great word too. We were silenced for over 26 years due to a gag order that my parents were coerced into signing. You know, my parents, they didn't know what they were doing. You know, they were just reeling in pain and trying to just hold everything together, because initially it was Carolyn who came forward at 12 years old. Actually, she didn't even really come forward. I spoke to her because in our case, we had physical evidence that was found. Our family was given the gift of the grand jury. It has changed us for the better. It has caused us to address things and deal with things we have not dealt with for 26 years, and that has caused a lot of pain, but it's been for a reason, and that's healing and seeking justice for others. This is the part where I get really nervous because I'm not a politician, so you're not going to hear me speak like one. We did visit senators, and it was very intimidating, although we were received very graciously and with kindness and compassion. But I have to be honest that with most of them, we just kept hearing the same excuses. And it was all of the excuses to cover up still for the Catholic Church and to support the Insurance Federation. It just, I never once heard a senator say, I'm voting for the victim. The senators that we went to see, I should say, because they were the ones that were either undecided or opposed. And I could get into all of the wrecks, but I think that they were all covered here. The bottom line is that the grand jury made the decision based off of fact, based off of the Catholic Church's own secret archives and also statistics and history of victims outside of, the Catholic Church, we need to also think about them, because the 4 recommendations need to be passed for everyone and for our children to be protected as well. And I just would implore you, senators, to do the right thing. At the end of the day, do the right thing. I believe so many of you want to do the right thing. I believe that Senator Corman's tears were real when we met with him. And I just know that you can do the right thing if you put everything else aside and you look at the facts just like the grand jury did.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Fortney. I'm the youngest of 9, and I just have something quick to say. Somebody sent us this quote one time, and it resonated with me and with what's going on in the Senate right now and the excuses that are being made for justice for victims. And it's by Thomas Jefferson, and he said, "I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change. With the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when a boy, as civilized society to remain ever under the regime of their barbarous ancestors." And what that says to me is that so long ago, over 275 years, Thomas Jefferson had the foresight to know that things would change over time. And as a society, as senators, the representatives of our state and our society, we have the responsibility, the social responsibility, to recognize these new truths that are coming to light through these grand jury reports and to do something about it through the laws, to change them, to protect children moving forward. And that's really all I want to say. I think she kind of covered the rest. So. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can see why I've said many times that Carolyn and Patty and their sisters and the other victims I've gotten to know in this process are my heroes. You guys spoke so beautifully, and I know it's not easy to share your truth in a public way like this, and we're grateful for that. Change will come to this Commonwealth, and it will be because of your bravery. Thank you. Thank you. Again, I want to thank my colleagues in law enforcement for your leadership and for being here, for Jennifer Storm and the tireless work she does on behalf of not just the Fortney sisters, but all victims across Pennsylvania. And with that, we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Hi, Mr. Shapiro. David Spunt with CBS in Philly. What is your reaction to the announcement of Cardinal Wuerl officially resigning? The Pope accepted his resignation. That came out a few hours ago. We know he was in Pittsburgh. What are your thoughts?
I think it is unacceptable that then Bishop Wuerl, now Cardinal Wuerl, oversaw and participated in the systematic cover-up that he did when leading the Pittsburgh diocese, and that he is now able to retire seemingly with no consequences for his actions that were documented not only in the grand jury report, but in the church's own secret archives. Now, I've said many times, it is not my role to make personnel decisions within the Catholic Church. That clearly rests with the Pope. But I think we've also learned in this process that we can't rely on the Church to fix itself. And that's where lawmakers come in. And that's why these grand jury recommendations are so important. 23 grand jurors voted unanimously to make clear that by passing these 4 reforms, including eliminating the criminal statute of limitations, we can ensure that something like this, on this scale and this scope, can never happen again in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's what my focus is on right now.
General, I believe when he was Bishop of Pittsburgh, his name was mentioned like over 200 times in that grand jury report, and we're getting mixed signals from Rome, from Pope Francis, who has apparently said that the cardinal served the church well, and he alluded to the cardinal's nobility, as a matter of fact.
The statements by Cardinal Wuerl in the immediate days after the report are directly contradicted by the church's own records, by the secret archives, by the unanimous findings of the grand jury. I'm not going to debate Cardinal Wuerl. The evidence is clear, and I would just encourage you to read the grand jury report to learn the truth about Cardinal Wuerl's actions.
And your reaction to what the Pope apparently is saying about the cardinal?
Again, I don't think it's my place to involve myself in the intramural issues within the church. I think the thing I can do is focus on the commitment I made to the grand jurors, to the survivors, to the people of Pennsylvania, to help not only bring transparency to the horrific abuse and cover-up that was going on here in Pennsylvania, but to ensure that something like this never happens again. And the best way I can do that is by helping shepherd through these 4 grand jury recommendations.
General, we have been hearing a call for action for months. I mean, we have the recommendations. How else can people pressure the senators, or what else needs to be done for senators to take action?
I think you'd have to ask the senators that. They have 3 days left to act. Senators have privately spoken to me and said that they want to vote for these reforms. I hope that their leader, Senator Scarnati, puts the bill that passed in the House on the floor of the Senate. If they have some technical changes they want to make, if there's some minor changes they want to make, fine. The Senate should do that. But the Senate should adopt the 4 grand jury recommendations as the House did. That's what they need to do. The people of Pennsylvania are paying attention. The voters in their districts are paying attention. And as the Fordney sisters so eloquently said, let's hope they do the right thing. Maria?
In today's Philadelphia Inquirer, my newspaper, there's a report that Senate leaders are, with just 3 days left next week, floating a version of this bill that would not put a statute of limitations retroactive for civil. There's no appetite for that apparently in that language. And if anything, it would create a tribunal. How can you be hopeful that that could change by Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of next week?
Well, look, let's examine the evidence of how we got here. The grand jury was very clear as to what they thought the 4 things that lawmakers needed to do were. The reaction from Pennsylvanians, Catholics and others, has been very clear that they want transparency and they want to see action in keeping with what the grand jurors came up with. I've been very clear. I'm for all 4, each of the 4 recommendations in the grand jury report. And the Pennsylvania House has been clear, voting overwhelmingly to adopt those reforms. This proposal that the Inquirer reported on simply does not meet that standard. Based on my communications with Senate leadership and senators of both parties, this isn't and shouldn't be considered through a partisan prism. There are senators who want to do what the House did and pass these 4 reforms. The only thing stopping them from being able to do that is whether or not the leadership chooses to bring this up for a vote. In terms of a fund, and I've not seen any bill, but just in general, as Jennifer Storm said, a fund is designed to meet the needs of one group in this equation, and that is the Catholic Church, not the victims. It's designed to put up however many resources they want to put up, not what the need is for the victims. And it's designed to further silence victims. That's not what the grand jurors called for. That's not what is needed at this time. That's not what the public wants. That's not the way the House of Representatives voted. The Senate has 3 days to do the right thing, and I hope they will. Anything else?
Were you surprised, my last question,
Sure.
since there is so little time left and that the Senate has had weeks to come up with a proposal, that they would put forth a proposal that does not contain a window?
Well, again, I've not seen a bill. The Senate has left themselves in a challenging position with only 3 days left. They still have plenty of time, though, to do the right thing. The roadmap exists. The example has been set by the House of Representatives. Now the Senate just needs to do the right thing. I've made it very clear where I'm standing in this. I'm standing with the grand jurors. I'm standing with the survivors. I'm standing with the people of Pennsylvania, and I'm standing on the side of justice and righteousness. Senators have a choice. They can either stand with us, or they can stand with lobbyists and those who oppose these reforms. That is the clear choice that they have to make in these next 3 days. Anything else?
Josh,
Thank you.
I
Oh,
just have
excuse
one
me.
thing.
Please,
I'm
Pam.
sorry.
No.
You
get to say whatever you want to say.
So, I'm sorry. I can't remember your name.
I'm Steve.
Steve. Okay.
KYW.
Okay. I just wanted to say something. I know Josh, or General Shapiro.
Josh.
Didn't, doesn't want to speak to the Catholic side of things. But as a Catholic, I do have an opinion about the retirement of Worrell. I didn't even know that until you said that, to be honest with you. He's retiring, and in the Catholic Church, that's probably a great thing. I mean, retirement's a great thing. But our priest retired. Our priest was a known pedophile when he was brought to Harrisburg Diocese. And he was a known pedophile when he was abusing us. They had found out 5 years before our abuse stopped that he was an abuser. And our priest retired, and they allowed him to retire, where he went back to New Jersey, and he abused us there also. So I have, for the Pope, I would say to the Pope, are you listening to Catholics? Because most of the Catholics that I'm talking to, including my father, who is a devout Catholic still, are saying that they would rather have a church filled with 5 people that is pure than this conglomerate with $1 million murals on the wall and it be tainted. And the window is what will take away the taint. We will be allowed to accuse and bring our perpetrator to justice. And the Catholic Church needs to, if the Pope truly wants a pure faith and Catholics that can walk in on Sunday morning with their head held high, knowing that their hierarchy is pure and doing the right thing, not only for them, but the children of this world, then they will open up every secret archive in the world. And that's the bottom line. You can't speak out of both sides of your mouth. Scripture doesn't teach that. So the Catholic Church shouldn't teach that, especially from the Pope's pulpit.
Amen. Thank you.
What she said.
You've been watching a news conference from Norristown, Pennsylvania, the Montgomery County Courthouse, I believe that was, where clergy abuse survivors from Pennsylvania were calling on the Pennsylvania State Senate to pass recommended reforms related to the statute of limitations in clergy abuse cases. I believe State Attorney General Shapiro mentioned that the senators have about 3 days to act to pass that legislation. We've also been following this morning the remnants of Hurricane Michael, which are now off the coast of the Atlantic seaboard, or just about. Looks like they're still up in the Nantucket area, up in Boston. We were talking about how much cooler it is today than yesterday. Here's a look at the 24-hour temperature change. It's 13 degrees cooler in the city at this moment than it was the same time yesterday. Earlier this morning, FEMA held a news conference to talk about its response to the Hurricane Michael in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and up the southeastern seaboard. Let's listen into a little bit of what FEMA had to say at that event.
These areas, there was a tremendous amount of debris, and so when you look at this, the damage in Mexico Beach, that is where the ocean rose potentially 14 feet with wave action on top and just shoved buildings out of the way. And when you have that type of damage, it takes some time to get in and actually go through and do the search and rescue. We hope to have 100% of the initial search and rescue operation done in Florida, today as well as Georgia. But we are moving tremendous resources that are already come into play and into place today. We have commodities in the state ready to go out and support those who are seeking food and water in many of the areas to backfill what the state is already doing. We have our disaster survivor assistance teams that are in place today. We're going to concentrate on the shelters. We have several thousand people in shelters, and that's where we're going to concentrate first. But the President proactively declared an expedited major disaster declaration for the state of Florida last night. And that includes individual assistance for 5 counties. And these are just initial counties. We'll add more counties as we are able to do damage assessments. But if you live in Bay County, Florida, Franklin County, Wakulla County, Taylor County, and Gulf County, and you believe that you've experienced damage, we would encourage you to contact 1-800-621-FEMA. Or if you can, it's better to go online if you can, and you can access this at disasterassistance.gov. You can also download the FEMA app to seek assistance from FEMA, and we can start to pre-register people. We've already registered almost 4,000 people this morning, so we're hard at work trying to do what we can to help people. The other goals outside of the life safety search and rescue mission is stabilizing the health and medical care system in Florida. The hospitals took a tremendous hit. We've been assisting the state and local governments to evacuate patients, get them stabilized. It's my understanding that we've also set up what are called decompression units, over 3 right now. These are basically triage centers to backfill medical support where we've lost the capability of some of the hospitals, and we'll continue to work and stabilize those areas. Obviously, we're doing damage assessments and moving DSA, our disaster assistance support team, in to start registering people. But the other focus is on communications. You have to be able to communicate to appropriately respond. And we're trying to do everything we can to get the private sector vendors, the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world, to get in to try to get their systems back up and running, so that not only so that citizens can begin to communicate on a normal routine, but that's going to take some time because the infrastructure was damaged. It's still not safe to return, particularly to Bay County, Florida. Doing so, there's no infrastructure there to support you, and quite honestly, it's a dangerous area to go back into. When you have this type of destruction, there's gas lines that are there, there's power lines that are down. In doing so, you're putting your life in danger, and we ask you to be patient, before you just try to rush back into those areas, and understand that we're doing everything that we can to get the roadways open and trying to stabilize the situation so that people can go home and figure out how to put the rest of their livelihood back together, down there in Bay County and some of those areas. Again, with the transportation lifeline, we're doing work across all of these lifelines, 7 lifelines. We're actively supporting safety, security, health and medical, food, water, and shelter. Obviously, power is the most important part. We have over 30,000 people in the private industry that are trying to get the power grid back up and running. But as we said yesterday, the infrastructure took a tremendous hit, particularly where you saw storm surge and 155-mile-an-hour winds encroach, and then it moved inland in southwest Georgia. Communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. That's where we're focused right now, and that's what these folks up here represent, and how the federal government is coming together to support our governors and the local governors. I have specifically spoken with Governor Deal this morning in Georgia, as well as Governor Scott in Florida. I'm also anxious. I will be getting downrange tomorrow night and be on the ground Sunday and Monday as well to make sure that we're also doing everything that we can down there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken Wedeleski with our partners from NOAA to talk about impacts.
And good morning.
Again, that was a news conference with FEMA this morning where they were talking about the response to Hurricane Michael gives you a little bit of an understanding of what they're facing on the ground there, having to rebuild capability for medical response, first response, before they can even get to things like power, and they're just trying to get people shelter down there. So had a little bit of the FEMA response there. Let's also get you a little bit of Governor Roy Cooper in North Carolina talking about his state's response to the storm. They of course saw more rain as a result and wind as well, already reeling from Hurricane Florence earlier in the season. Let's get you some of what he had to say from the North Carolina Emergency Operations Center.
Yet another storm. During Michael, we saw wind gusts of almost 70 miles an hour in the Outer Banks, rain totaling almost 10 inches in Allegheny County, and most things in between. This morning, nearly 500,000 North Carolina homes and businesses are without power. We're grateful to the thousands of utility crews who are out there working to fix that. Flash floods receded overnight, but some rivers are still rising. The Dan and the Yadkin rivers are forecast to crest out of their banks today and tomorrow, but we don't expect much damage from that. Today, emergency managers and local governments began assessing damages to homes, roads, and public facilities in their communities. I urge everyone to remain safe while they inspect damages and work on cleanup efforts. There are many fallen trees that need to be removed, and that can be dangerous work. Be careful and use the proper safety equipment, and don't touch downed power lines. Hundreds of primary and secondary roads are closed. Many of them are blocked by trees. Department of Transportation crews are working today along with the North Carolina Forest Service to clear the trees and get the roads open. We saw some powerful rushing waters yesterday, and there are some roads that have been washed out and are unsafe for travel. DOT is working on those roads as well, and I have to caution again, never drive around barricades. Those roads are closed for a reason. At the coast, there will be heavy surf and strong riptides caused by Michael, which is now out in the Atlantic. It'll be a beautiful weekend at the beach, but it's not a time to go in swimming. Sadly, at least one life in North Carolina was lost to Michael's fury. A man died yesterday in Iredell County when a tree fell in his vehicle while he was driving on US 64, and we mourn with his family and friends. We also have reports of a vehicle running into a fallen tree that resulted in 2 other people being killed in McDowell County. We're waiting on official confirmation of that. Local first responders report rescuing nearly 100 people and evacuating many more yesterday from flash floods in Guilford, Forsyth, Iredell, Henderson, Burke, McDowell, and other counties. We thank again the first responders and swift water rescue teams who jump in whenever we need them. We have 31 school systems closed today, and 30 systems have delayed their openings. There were 8 shelters open for people who needed a safe place while Matthew passed through our state, but most of them will likely be closing soon. Our state emergency response team leaders are here again this morning, and I'm going to have you hear from some of them. We'll first hear from Emergency Management Director Mike Sprayberry. Mike?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. Based on the decreased threat level, the State Emergency Operations Center activation level has been changed to a level 4. Our focus today is going to be on addressing damage, debris operations, and power restoration. Our National Guard teammates have completed their missions and are returning to home station, while our Forest Service, State Highway Patrol, and DOT partners are out working hard to get our roads passable and safe. Power restoration operations are ongoing by our utility partners. As you drive, please take special care as all of these professionals are working on or near our roadways to get our state back to normal. We also, once again, want to thank all of our local search and rescue teams who, once again, performed so well during Michael. And as always, follow the instructions of your local officials and stay tuned to your local media for situational awareness such as road closures and downed power lines. Thank you for your outstanding support of the North Carolina State Emergency Response Team during Tropical Storm Michael. Thank you, Governor.
We'll now hear from Colonel Glenn.
Again, that was a little bit from North Carolina, the Emergency Operations Center there, where they were talking about the impact of what, by the time it reached North Carolina, was a tropical storm, Michael, and their road to recovery there, of course, still trying to clean up a lot from Hurricane Florence earlier this summer, or fall. That was Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina speaking there. Let's get a quick look again at the stock market. Rebounding after 2 down days. It's currently at 314 points up, about a percentage point and a quarter. Dow Jones Industrial at 25,369. So there's a check of the stock market. We talked a little bit about the weather earlier. I'm seeing that the National Weather Service has just taken down a wind advisory. It's no longer in effect. Let's show you some of the current wind speeds. Still getting winds to 20 miles an hour sustained in Philadelphia, 22 in Wilmington. Weather Service says the combination of winds gusting to 40 miles per hour and the saturated ground may still result in isolated tree and power line damage, with isolated power outages possible into this afternoon. Here are your wind gusts. You see, we do have, in the last hour, gusts to 36 in Reading, 37 in Mount Pocono, 26 in Philadelphia, and 20s in multiple other places, 32 miles per hour in Millville. So be aware, there is still the potential for some isolated tree and power line damage with the winds that are still in our area. Let's get you one more look at the Fox 29 Weather Authority 7-day forecast. Sunny and 62 today. AM showers and cooler on Saturday, 58. Partly sunny and cool Sunday, 60. Monday, shower chance, 68. Tuesday, another shower chance, 58. Wednesday, sweater weather comes back to the area. It's 59 and 55 for Thursday. So slightly mild 60s for the start of the week, and then as we settle into the work week, drop down into 50s for daytime highs and 40s for some overnight lows. It's a beautiful day out there. If you get a chance to step outside and take a walk, enjoy the outdoors, the sunny skies and the a little more crisp weather. Thank you very much for joining Fox 29 News Now today. We're with you weekdays after Good Day Philadelphia, around 10 o'clock start most days. Thank you for watching and have a great day.